Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Fielder Church podcast. Today, we're starting a new series talking about sending and talking about how and why you should take the gospel to the nations. In this series, you'll hear from missionaries, church planters, and even people who are living locally and living sent to the people around them. So to kick off this series, I have brought two of my friends and coworkers on the podcast to share with you why we should go and to talk about some short-term trip options for you. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves and share about who you are? Tell the people who you are.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm Angela Kwok, and I am the Associate Mobilization Pastor. And I'm actually originally from Washington State, so the Seattle area. Grew up there, went to school there, and then came to Texas for seminary, and then graduated and came to Fielder.
Welcome to Texas.
Yeah, thank you.
We're glad to have her.
I know.
My name is Richard McKay, and I serve as the lead missions pastor here at Fielder Church. I'm originally from Mississippi, but I ended up here because I was serving overseas as a missionary, and then I came to seminary to get some better training on how to navigate some of that, and that's when I got connected with Fielder Church when I was in this area. So I've been at Fielder it was 5 years this August.
Wow.
So
I know. We're all like not from Texas.
That's
I don't know
right.
what is? God just bringing us all here. You know?
Who would have thought?
Great state. Who would have thought? You know?
Bring the gospel to Texas.
That's right. You know, people in Texas need Jesus. Oh my goodness. Okay, so today we are gonna focus in a little bit more just on short-term mission trips, and I want to hear your experience too about missions and how that has impacted your lives and your experience overseas. But let's start with short-term trips. So if someone were to ask you, like, are mission trips like in the Bible? Like, is this biblical, what you're taking and leading the church to do? Or where did we get this idea of short-term trips? What would you tell somebody?
Yeah. Yes, I would say short-term trips are biblical. I think trips in general and missions is biblical. And you see that actually in one of the last commands that Jesus gave to the disciples was the Great Commission. It's a very famous verse, Matthew 28, verses 18 to 20. And it talks about going and making disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that he has commanded. And so why I connect that verse to short-term trips is because it assumes that we're going, right?
Yeah.
Actually, in the Greek, it's as you go. So it assumes we're going. And also, it tells us to make disciples. And something that people miss is of all nations. Yeah. Now, how do we even make disciples of all nations? Well, we have to go. We have to be going on these trips. And a lot of times, people can't automatically go on these long-term trips where it's where they live there. So short-term trips is a great way to learn about different cultures and to expose people to different cultures and to really share the gospel. And so that's like a great verse that I use to show that Jesus has commanded it and something that people miss when we see the Great Commission.
I'd add to that too, something else that we see in Scripture, we were talking about this on the way over, is that all of the letters in Acts, not in Acts, all the letters that follow Acts are all letters that were written to the church. And so we see Paul encouraging other churches, other church planters, other new believers that are gathered in areas. And that's really what we're doing when we're sending out short-term trips, is that we're encouraging churches in other places, or we're seeking out to see new believers in other places. And so it's just very clear in Scripture that this is something that would continually happen, that there would be encouragement for the local church in different areas, as well as the sending of others to come alongside them, even sending resources and people. Paul writes that I need so-and-so to come bring me my jacket, as you come along, because it is this assumption that we're visiting and we're caring and we're coming alongside. So I think sometimes we think a short-term mission trip is like a pop in and then I might support for a little bit and then I'll leave. And in some ways it looks like that, but really with our partnerships, and we can talk about this later too, is that we are in it for the long term. And so we're coming alongside them and helping to encourage them for longer than just a season. So
that's good.
It really is all through Scripture. Scripture, especially in the New Testament,
Yeah.
we see a caring for and coming alongside other church planters and believers.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, God is a sending God, right? I mean, it's the gospel in that, right? He sent his son Jesus
Exactly.
to the earth to rescue and redeem us. And so giving us that command too, just what you said. I mean, that's how we're supposed to live, sent, going to people who are broken. And so I love that you guys share that. Now, I have heard people say that short-term mission trips can do more harm than good. It's not worth it to go because of the harm it can cause people. You know, there might be pushback from like Tom's model, like providing things for people, just giving money and leaving. Have you seen that in your experience with missions or your experience overseas? Have you seen that? Have you not seen that? Or have you seen the positives of people going? I'd love to hear your input on kind of that statement that short-term trips do more harm than good.
Yeah. I think there are ways to do short-term trips poorly.
Yeah.
So if you have the view that I am just going in to receive some kind of experience, then you're probably not going for the right reasons.
Yeah.
When you position yourself to say, like, I want to come alongside these local believers, or I want to be a part of sharing the gospel in this new place, or I want to bless this church planter or missionary, then you're setting yourself up to be more, I don't want to say successful, but to see a positive result.
Yeah.
When you're saying these people need me, or I've got to help them, or they won't survive without me, then you've got a different mindset that you're setting yourself up kind of to hurt, I think, in some ways.
Yeah.
Right. I agree. And that's why I think it's important that you have some sort of long-term person there, especially a church or a missionary there to follow up in the short term. Because, I've definitely seen churches and people, like different organizations, go for a short bit and do all the things, like count all the numbers and then come back without really lasting impact. And that's actually a lot more harmful than helpful.
Yeah.
And so I agree. If there is a long-term connection to the short term, that's more strategic than if you just had short-term trips. And I would argue that it's short-term trips are worth it when done right, because it exposes you to so much more and it sets people up. And like Richard said, it's a vision trip. It's seeing the people on the ground, seeing the culture, learning so many things, and that be the launching pad to something longer and something greater. And so that's really what the purpose of short-term trips are.
Yeah, that's really good. I kind of honing in on that just a little bit. You know, you said it's about their mindset, or like, why are they going? You know, it's not about to like get something out of it. So how, you know, there's a lot of training involved in short-term trips. There's a lot of like discipleship on the front end just to prepare people for this. What are some of those key things that you're like, someone signs up for a trip, here's how we are going to walk alongside them and prepare them to be ready for this, not to just go and paint a building, not just to go and like, you know, high five somebody overseas. I don't know. It sounds so silly, but like, or take a picture with people. How are you walking alongside people, discipling people to go on a short-term trip?
Yeah. Maddie, you know this well because you helped us set up so much of the training.
I did used to be on the missions team.
that we still use today.
Yeah.
And really so much of it was trying to help people and to see what their perspective is. Because I think sometimes that we don't recognize that we're all walking in with a lens, that we see things in a certain way because of our experiences, because of things that we've walked through or people we've interacted with or whatever it is. And so part of it is can I lift up my lens for just a moment to be able to experience something different and come alongside people who live differently than me and care for the things that they're doing, not correcting them. I think that there's a part of American culture that we see things and we say, this could be done better.
It's good.
I was thinking about an example, but I don't think I should share it. But where we come in and we say, we could do this better than what they're doing. And then we start to put on our culture to shift the way that they do things, or looking at a culture and saying, ooh, that's so different than what I do, and so I don't like it for whatever reasons. And instead of just recognizing it's different than what I do, it's different than what people back where I live do, but it's not wrong, it's not bad, it's just different than what we do. And so being able to appreciate those things. So a lot of our training teaches about appreciating cultures, about how to share the gospel. I mean, really, like what we were talking about earlier, when you're hurting is when you don't have a full understanding of the gospel, because the gospel is so much more than just having a conversion.
Yeah, that's good.
But like the gospel impacts so many different areas of someone's life, and it shifts their whole perspective of who Jesus is because of what Jesus has done. This is what love looks like, right? And so because of that, if we don't fully understand the truth of the gospel, then we can't truly share that message. Instead, we're just evangelizing, or we're just painting a building, or doing some kind of humanitarian service work. Well, there's so much more to it. And so we try to teach along that, but you can talk about the specifics about how we do that.
Yeah. I mean, we meet multiple times, and a lot of it's actually praying too, because we need to pray. We need the Lord and to be sensitive, and learning to be sensitive to the Spirit and to be led by the Spirit, since there's a lot that goes on, and a lot of times we need the Lord. And that's part of every verse that talks about going. It's like the Spirit goes with us. Jesus is with us. Like he is with us in it all. And so that's a huge part to these training, is learning how to pray, learning how to be led by the Spirit, and being a cultural learner, like Richard said, but also even just to learn how to encourage our long-term workers. It's assisting them and allowing them to set the schedule, to let them create opportunities and connections, so we don't hurt the things that they were trying to do for. Exactly. Because sometimes short-term trips without input of the long-term worker, we can almost ruin the work that they were trying to create. So learning under them and letting them set the pace is, I think, also a big part to short-term trips that we need to be aware of. And the whole reason we go is to assist them in their work.
That's really good. I want to shift just a little bit and just hear more about your experience overseas with missions, whether short-term, mid-term, long-term. I'll let you share what you want to share. But I think it would be good for the listener just to understand where you're coming from and the experience that God has given you with global missions or even local missions, so they can, maybe somebody's listening and they're like, oh, I want to know more about that. And so I would love for both of you to answer, but can you share about your experience with missions?
Yeah, so I've been on a mission trip almost every summer since I was in youth group.
Wow.
So the age limit that we had was 8th grade. And so I would be so excited for the time that I turn 8th grade so that I can go on a trip, because I would see the team just prepping so hard. And the Korean church, I grew up in the Korean church, we would go hardcore. And we would have like a training for like 10 months every week. Oh my goodness. The trip. And so there would be a lot of bonding and unity, a lot of growth and a lot of discipline. And so I desired and hungered after that. And we didn't have the options that we did here at Fielder. We had one mission trip. So I wouldn't even pray about it. I would just go, because that's how much I got excited about and how much I appreciated these trips. So I've been anywhere from World Changers, locally in California, or to even like other countries. I don't know if I can say, but all across the world, just different places every year. And it was just such a blessing, because it would be such a point of growth. Like it makes it that much faster when you go to a place where you need the Lord and you're training and being consistent with other believers and growing together for one purpose, to share the gospel. And so that has been my experience. And I went midterm through YWAM. And I was in India for 3 months, and that was also life-changing. And so I love missions and I love seeing the world and seeing the Lord through all different cultures and nations.
Absolutely. I'm sure you've learned so much.
Oh, yeah.
I guess if you could, sorry to put you on the spot, but just like as you've experienced these different cultures and different people around the world, and even I'm sure seen the Lord answer prayers all over the world. Do you have something that stands out where you're like, this changed my relationship with the Lord? Like it changed the way that I see how he pursues people. Do you have,
oh yeah, definitely. We
don't have enough time on the podcast, but you could, pick a top one.
I think one of the things is actually part of the struggle with mission trips for me actually was money. So that was always a barrier for me. And, you know, as someone who's young and naive, I would ask my mom, can I go? And she'd hesitate because we struggled a lot with money growing up. And so she would hesitate, but the Lord would always provide, no matter what amount through fundraising, through people donating, through people coming together. And I think in hindsight, looking back at God's provision in the midst of it all, just so that I can go and share the gospel with someone or learn more about the nations was, I think, now that I'm thinking back to it, I'm like, wow, that's incredible. Like God really does provide. And I think money is one of the greatest barriers that people have. And so just to like encourage anyone listening, like seriously, money for me has been a barrier, but the Lord has shown and proven faithful. And so
that's so good. That's really good. Okay, what about you, Richard?
So I grew up in a mission-minded church. So 4th through 6th grade, we did a thing called Mission Fuge, which was a camp that we would go to, and we would serve in that city kind of locally.
Gotcha.
And I was exposed to church planters at that point. And now I can think back and kind of see some of the impact that they had on me too, just teaching me about what does it look like to plant churches and engage in that way. And then we would do local missions engagement when I was in high school. And then when I was in college, I was doing more of humanitarian engagement, but I wasn't really doing it for gospel purposes. And then it wasn't until I was living and working alongside another local church when I was living in D.C. that I really got to come alongside some students and see them experience church planting. And so we took them on a couple of mission trips. But really, I had not chosen to go on a mission trip. So I love the way that you shared that about funds, because that was something that intimidated me too, that there were mission trips that were available and offered. And I was always so hesitant to say yes. And so I was 26 before I really obeyed what God had called me to do. So that's when I decided, or I heard from the Lord really, that I was supposed to go overseas. And so I served overseas for 2 years through the Journeyman program, which again, paid program, didn't have to fundraise for that. And just again, because I was so nervous about all of that. But I think, you know, if I had only allowed the Lord to show me, teach me those things. But while I was serving, I actually got to use my college degree while I was overseas too. So I worked with a tourism agency. I was living in a place that we couldn't be open or visible as missionaries. And so I was working as a tour guide while I was there, and we would do biblical tours and be able to talk about who Jesus was in this place, and even who walked these streets before. So it was so much, the New Testament was talking about the area that I was living in, and it was just so incredible to be able to experience like firsthand. This is what the writers were talking about, and even some of the culture still holds over to today. So it was a Muslim majority country, and so I learned a lot about sharing the gospel with Muslims. And was really overwhelmed by the weight that there were just so many that didn't have access to the gospel and won't unless someone says yes to go and to be a part of their culture, to learn and understand, and even be able to communicate it in a way that they can understand. And so that was a huge blessing, but then also opened my eyes up to, I can't be the only one that God is calling that's resistant. And so that moved me to, I mentioned earlier, to go to seminary, but even as I was going to seminary, it was the intent of going back overseas. And so I got my international church planting degree from Southwestern, and that's when I learned about Fielder, and then its focus or plan to try to create some pipelines to really prepare people to be sent. When Jared was first describing that to me when we were in the interview process, I was like, I got to be a part of this church. If a church is actually going to be intentional about preparing people and sending them out, I want to be a part of that church. Because that was really the burden that I had felt when I was preparing to go, was why did it take me so long to say yes? What were the barriers that kept me from being able to just be obedient to what God was calling me to? And He redeems all things for His timing. So it was good. But at the same time, I want to be a part of helping other people say yes at the right time.
Absolutely. No, that's so good. Finances were a barrier for me too. I'm like sitting here relating to you guys. I didn't go on a mission trip until I joined staff with Fielder, and until it was like, hey, you're a leader now, go with these kids. And So yeah, I mean, that is like a very real barrier for people.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, you said there are other barriers. What are some other barriers that you've heard, that maybe you could speak to somebody?
Yeah.
I've might have heard a few, but as you're walking with people, for them to be sent either on short term, midterm, or long term, as they're wrestling through, why should I go? Should I go? No, talking myself out of it. What are some barriers to going, maybe, that you've heard?
Yeah, I think timing of mission trips is sometimes a barrier because people have to choose between vacation or a mission trip.
That's true.
And yes, it's a hard
It's a reality.
decision and it's a real decision that people have to make, and we have to count the costs. And so that's one thing I've heard, or giving time to preparing for these trips is definitely another barrier.
Yeah.
Going on a trip with people you don't know or aren't as close with, so having to step outside of your comfort zone, or the different food or weather or culture that you might not be the most comfortable with. So those are some of the barriers that people feel. But I would argue that some of these barriers are actually the places of most redemption and of most growth and most learning.
So good. That's so good.
I'd add to that, there's fear sometimes of the unknown. And so either it's fear because we're going into a country that seems to be unstable, or by American standards seems unsafe, or walking into a culture that is even like Muslim, for example. We've got such a view of the way that Muslims might live or interact, or the way they might think about Americans. And so that makes us more hesitant to say yes. But really, like what you were saying too, I think that every single barrier that's there is really an opportunity for you to see God move, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Is for you to ask God to reveal why that's a fear, as well as let Him prove Himself as to why these aren't things
really
that we
good.
should be fearful of or be hesitant because of too.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really good. So with that person who's wrestling with that call to go through all of their fears, how do they know if they should go or not? Like, do they need to hear the voice of God? Like, do they need a sign? How does somebody know that they should go on a trip, short term, midterm, or even long term?
Yeah, I mean, all they have to do is open their Bible and
Mic drop, and we're done. Okay.
no, but really, I do believe that one of the other barriers is that people wait for this huge sign, the cloud, to spell out go for them to go. But really, God has already told us to go, and they don't need that huge sign. They just need to ask where and when. And I think that will just drop so much burden to ask God, are you calling me? It's like, yes, he is. Okay, let's take the next step and really focus in on where he might be calling you, for how long, and taking baby steps,
Yes,
and it's
right.
okay to not jump in fully, because the Lord will lead you as you take your steps. And I think that's something we need to realize, is the Lord's will prevail as he does that. So that's my first response.
I love that. That's why you're in this seat right now. You're like, let's read the Bible together. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love that.
With short term, it really is. There's like no question. It's so clear in Scripture that this is a part of being a part of the body, is supporting other bodies. And then when it comes to midterm and long term, like that's why Fielder has invested in staff that want to come alongside you to help you discern what is God saying, where is He calling, why might it be these locations. And so we want to walk alongside you. That's why Angela's here. That's why I want to be here. There are others too that are part of our staff that want to walk alongside you in that way too. So you don't have to make this alone. Part of discerning these things is seeking out wise counsel.
That's good.
I don't know how wise we are, but we can definitely help you discern the voice of God. Having some experience in those areas, and to even put to rest some of the things that you might be wrestling with. So don't try to figure out alone. Like, talk to us.
Right.
That's really good. And I think a barrier too that I want to get into maybe a little bit, maybe a couple questions down the road, is a barrier is like life stage. Like, hey, I've got kids, little kids, or I'm a senior adult. I can't do this. It's for young people. And so as you guys are walking alongside them, you're like designing trips, or like specifically have trips for these different age groups too. So
That's right.
I love that. You keep everybody in mind. You're walking through this. You're like, we have something for everybody.
We try to, and if it doesn't become apparent to the person as they're reading through, trying to figure out what trip that they might go on, we want to help you navigate that,
Right.
because we can give you advice on parents who have taken their kids before, or older people who have gone, who have walking issues, so we can help you navigate all of those pieces. There is a trip for everybody.
There is. Yeah. I love that you guys have done that. So let's go there. Let's talk about the trips that Fielder has this go round. So every year, or do you guys want to walk me through that process? Every year you set up trips, right? So tell me, what is that like?
So we've got long-term partnerships that we've been in relationship with for years in some cases, and some are kind of brand new. Some of those are in the States. Some of those are also in the States, but here local, that we could reach pretty regularly. Or also folks that are international. And so based on those areas, every single trip that we send, or every single church planter and missionary that we partner alongside, has opportunities for midterm going and long-term going.
Wow.
So we reach out to them usually as soon as a trip returns, or sometime in August, September, about what needs that they might have, and how can we come alongside those needs. And then that's when we start to form these trips. And then we will release them in November, usually on our sending Sunday. So we'll get a whole booklet that have all the details.
We love that booklet.
We love the booklet, and it's beautiful this year.
It is beautiful.
Maddie again coming through for us.
Thank you, Maddie.
But we'll go in there and we'll describe each of the church plants and kind of what their goals are, and the things that they're trying to achieve where they are. And then people have an opportunity to decide, is this a trip that I'm supposed to say yes to? For certain age graded, we've got a pipeline, like we talked about earlier, that gives them just different steps of exposure. So with those who are in starting in the 6th grade, we have their first trip where they get exposed. And brand new this year, we have a brand new partner that they're going to come alongside. So we're excited about what that looks like. And then exposing them to unreached people groups, giving them a taste of what it would look like to live overseas. They get to interact with a national church planter. So everything just kind of a step up, so that when it comes time for them to say yes to something that God is calling them to, they've already experienced so much of it, so many different cultures, so many different religions, that they're able to say yes a little bit more easily. So we've got how many options this year?
We have 22 trip options and growing.
Wow.
Community groups want to go on trips, or different people are willing and open and wanting. We are able to customize trips for community groups, and it's just so many opportunities and so many choices.
Wow.
So,
okay, let's talk about a few of them.
Yes.
I'll let you pick whichever ones you want to share of the 22.
Yes.
But will you share about a partner, a location, if you're able to, and then what that person who would go on the trip would do, like what that trip looks like. So if you just paint a picture for a trip, just for the people listening, we'll do a few of them maybe.
Yeah, I think one of them, the easiest one, is called Reach Weekend, which
Reach
is
Weekend.
here. It's local, so and it's basically
No vacation
free.
time needed.
Yeah, no vacation time. Yeah, just take a weekend, and it's free pretty much. And it's a really great opportunity where you just take a weekend, like the name says, and you just learn about different religion. For example, we learned about Hinduism this past Reach Weekend, and we had an opportunity to hear from actually one of our partners who does like temple visits, and he's been overseas for years and just knows different the religion so well that he did a training on how to reach them, how to have gospel conversation, what are some bridges to make the intimidation of a new religion kind of less, so that people feel confident to be able to boldly share or create relationship and friendships with people here in Arlington, since Arlington's the 8th most diverse city in the U.S.
In the whole U.S.
In the whole U.S. And so it's just a really easy opportunity to learn, but you also get to apply what you learn. And so we get to go out to the community, whether it's a temple. This time we did Big Howdy at UTA, just to get to know our friends, get to make American friends is the big thing with international friends who come. They don't get to go in an American home. And so just creating those relationships, but also training them, equipping them to be able to have a comfortable conversation and not be offensive,
Yeah.
and just love on our friends well.
I mean, the nations are here. I love that
Exactly.
you guys
Here.
have that
Exactly.
option for people. And that's for all ages too,
All
right?
ages, really easy,
Yeah.
right here.
Right here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Tell me another one.
Yeah.
Our first mission trip to go on as a family was here in the States. And so there are a couple of different church planters here that you could do that alongside. One is Mesa Church in San Diego. That there's a family trip. There are a couple of age graded trips also, but that you could take your whole family and go. So whatever age your kids are, that you're serving a church planter who has young kids, and they're on mission constantly with those young kids. And I think that that's something that we forget is a really useful tool. So even when we took our kids, it was when our oldest was probably 2 years old, and so Isaac was like a baby.
Wow.
So all the church plant that we were helping at that season was a Chinese church plant, and so all the older ladies, they wanted to hold the baby, and it gave us so much access to the people. Is basically what I'm getting at. It's like you forget that this is like those are gifts to your family in order to access an opportunity for the gospel. And so sometimes I think we think, oh, it's so difficult to get my kids there, or whatever it might look like. But even this last San Diego trip, there were lots of kids that went alongside.
Awesome.
And so that was just like the doors open wide for those opportunities. And it reflects to people in the community that the church is trying to reach, that this is a family-friendly church. And that's really what we want to invest in the next generation. This gives those church planters an opportunity to do that too. And so San Diego is a great example of that. New Creation will have that opportunity, and also River Church in Colorado. The Borough Church in New York. So yeah, we've got lots of options in the States too. Not that you shouldn't take your kids overseas though, because we did have a couple this year that chose to take their 3-year-old to Southeast Asia.
Wow.
And I would argue that Southeast Asia is probably one of the hardest trips. I went alongside them this year. And it was tough, and I loved it so much because it challenged me in so many different ways. But again, this 3-year-old opened up so many doors for the families to have conversations that we wouldn't have been able to engage with otherwise. And they're just, kids are attractional in that way too. So I definitely encourage you to consider that in that way. But sorry, I didn't talk about a specific place, but
No, it's
Mesa
okay.
Church, but then also
So many places.
Southeast Asia. That's true. I love all the trips.
Do you? Okay, good.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man, no, but I love that you went there because in these trips, that might be a barrier. Is like my children are a burden. I can't bring them with me because I can't focus on ministry or sharing the gospel. But what I'm hearing you say is that no, these children are helping us reach people, and also like you are helping parents like disciple their children right through this. Like that's what y'all are trying to do.
And I'm not, you're not going to have every day going to be great when you bring your kids.
Oh, 3-year-olds aren't angels. Okay, go.
But because there's going to be warfare every single trip that we go on, there's going to be areas that we're being attacked by the enemy, because this is the last thing that he wants is an opportunity for someone to hear the gospel and have an opportunity to respond to the gospel. And so being aware of that, it just changes the way that you pray. And so we have people praying over our family. We have people actively praying for our partners that were receiving us, but then also that we were praying for those things. And so even some of the bad attitudes that we run into at home weren't as much of an issue while we were not necessarily overseas. We served nationally, but it was the same thing with this other couple overseas, is that some of the behavioral issues that they dealt with before that they were nervous about and we covered in prayer as a team, we didn't experience when they were overseas. And so there's an element to, and Angela mentioned this earlier when we were talking about preparation, about how important prayer is alongside all of this. It's like really learning how to cover each one of these things in prayer changes everything. And it shifts the way that you live when you come back too.
That's really good. Is there another trip that you could share about that would be like an international option, whether in South America, Central Asia, Southeast Asia? Would you share about maybe an international option that's available for people to share about a partner? If you're able to, I don't know who you want to share about. So.
All those are available. Central Asia.
It's like I've read the booklet or something.
Yeah, it's like,
Which one would you like to share about? Okay.
So since I talked a little bit about Southeast Asia, probably I should mention our South American one is really an awesome trip if, especially if you have any kind of Spanish language or availability to be willing to communicate in Spanish, but you don't have to speak Spanish to be a part of this trip. We have translators that are alongside. Same thing with every international trip. We have translators or at least missionaries that are willing to help translate those pieces. So you are effective even if you don't speak the language.
Yeah.
Which is another big lie that sometimes people believe. But in South America, we go down to the border of Venezuela. And so we've been helping to come alongside those who are escaping Venezuela right now and coming into Colombia. And so there in Cucuta, there is a church plant that we've been partnering with that gives humanitarian aid and is also sharing the gospel with those who are coming alongside or that are coming out of Venezuela and just needing some assistance and care. And so there are opportunities to like love on their kids. There are opportunities to like be, if you have any kind of medical background, that's a huge need that they have. If you are skilled in construction or any of those pieces too, there's all kind of things that you can come alongside that team there in that church to be able to bless them. So that's an awesome trip to be a part of. But it's, you know, with every trip, there's also spiritual warfare. And can be tough, but it's a good one.
I know. I went on that trip and I mean, man, it was my favorite thing. But you're right. So much spiritual warfare at the border. I mean, there's so much evil and just people taking advantage of people. And it's so heartbreaking to see humanity act this way. But then like as we prayed and asked for the Lord to move, we saw God answer prayers like immediately. Like it was so beautiful how our team came together. And like what you said, like we prayed and asked for the Lord to provide where we needed provision, to bring people to faith that we saw were under oppression, and just provide for people financially or just with resources, and saw him do it over and over again, like right there on the trip. And so just even being able to prayer walk the area where there's so much hurt and pain and people don't have hope, and just getting to love people and share joy and celebrate with them. It was it's incredible trip, and the church plant there is doing incredible things to advance the kingdom. So God's definitely using them. So.
And that's another exciting piece too, is that they're multiplying, so that there's even more aid and opportunity in other spots along, either along the border or along the path that that most of the refugees are traveling right now too. So it's just really, again, a move of God to be able to see help and relief in that area. And it's hard because like you can't solve their problems. Like you're going down and like what we were talking about earlier, there's no way that you are going to fix everything for them, but you can be a part of their journey, helping them to receive some kind of hope, helping them to receive some kind of reprieve along their journey, and to care for them. And that's really the love of God right there, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we've been hinting on it a little bit, just the strategy that you have with kind of forming these trips. And you hinted on just this pipeline with children or students. Could you talk a little bit more about how you guys have been intentional in making sure that we have a trip, you know, for every age? Talk a little about the pipeline that you guys have.
Yeah, the pipeline is starting from sixth grade. So as even younger than me. Sixth grade, where that is their first exposure to missions. And so every grade from 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, like it's like a step more and more as the grade gets older, to challenge them a little more, to expose them a little more to the nations, starting from Texas to Oklahoma to San Diego, New York, and then other places that we can't say, but it's great. It's amazing. And so that is kind of the pipeline we're talking about when we say that. But also just in general, like for anyone who's new, like the options that are available from like little like easier, not as crazy to harder ones like Southeast Asia, which but at the same time, even though we have these pipelines, we have new believers saying yes to going to even the hardest places. And we see so much fruit from people just saying yes and being bold to obey the call that God has given. So although we have like set these things in place, the Lord just goes beyond what we could even create. So
I think too, it's kind of recognizing that you don't just go from pew sitter to overseas missionary. And so what are the steps that we need to lead our church toward to really having a deeper understanding of the gospel, a deeper understanding of the church globally, so that they can be taken on that journey. And so that's really what it is that every trip is a vision trip. It's an opportunity to see and to engage and to learn something more. We talk about at our covenant membership that mission trips are a regular part of discipleship. And so alongside that, we want to build that within the way that we shepherd people through mission trips. So you've got different levels, like what Angela was saying. So you're not expected to go off the deep end into a closed country where you can't speak the name of where you're going on your first trip. But maybe God will call you to do that. And so we want to help you discern those pieces to kind of take those steps. So when it comes to adults, that's what that looks like. And then with the age graded, it makes a little bit more sense to just have different exposures along the way, so that by the time you're a senior in high school, okay, I know what a church plant is, and I'm willing to consider what that looks like to go and to live alongside them. Maybe I'll choose to go to college in a strategic location. So it's building up to that point, and hopefully taking the parents on that same journey too, that they're coming back and they're talking about the things that they've been exposed to, or about the way that the church planter interacted with them. So just that we have a more robust understanding of the church globally. And college, the same thing too, that we'd love to see more and more college students go through summer discipleship program, to be willing to say yes to 3 to 6 weeks, or even up to 3 months, to be serving alongside a church planter. But that's not necessarily the first step. It's usually going on one of the mission trips, and that could be here locally with Reach Weekend and giving exposure to look at all the people that are around you, to then going nationally, to then going internationally, and then saying yes to a longer term.
Oh, that's really good. We've kind of been hinting or focusing on short-term trips or kind of shorter, but both of y'all had experience in longer stints, midterm or long-term. So if somebody is maybe wrestling with a call to go long-term, like, why do people go long-term? Like, why should somebody spend more than a month overseas in a people group doing missions?
With short-term, there's a lot of exposure that happens, and you learn a lot of things. But the longer that you can stay alongside a culture, the more that you're going to understand why they operate the way that they do. What are their barriers to the gospel? What is it even about things that are embedded in their language that I wouldn't understand unless I learned that language and studied those people, had multiple friendships, really invested enough that I would be able to take something deeper about what's going on in the culture. Because I think that, again, short-term trip is really valuable for all the reasons that we mentioned already, whether it's just caring for the people on the ground or giving yourself some first exposure. But when you say yes to a midterm, like, you get to help in ways that a short-term trip can't really. Like, they can help with a particular project. Usually that's what we see, is a particular project is being helped. Or you're prayer walking this area that we needed to see breakthrough. And those things are effective and strategic. But if you're there for longer, you get an opportunity to make relationships. You get an opportunity to really experience the culture. You might have had just a couple of meals while you're doing the short term, but on midterm, you're eating all the time. And then you're seeing how important food is to all these different cultures too. And then for long term, really, again, with our partnerships, we don't want to pop in and pop out. Like, we want to see people say yes to coming alongside a culture and really investing in them well. And so for long term, that's really what we're praying for, is that people would say yes for a long stint. And long can look different. Long could be a year for you. Long could be the rest of your life. So there's some variety there to kind of wrestle with. But really, that's what we're praying for, is that people would say yes to live among a culture, to understand them well, to know their language, to know their history, and share the gospel alongside that. Because the gospel becomes that much more effective the more that we can contextualize or help people to really understand it in their heart language. And their heart language is not just the language that they speak. It's also their history. It's the weight that they carry with them. And so once we start to really delve into that is when we can start to see some breakthrough.
That's really good.
Yeah, and I would also add, when you go long term, you build relational equity that you wouldn't on a short term. And a lot of times that's what you need, is people need to trust you
Yeah.
and see that you really do love them. And that opens the opportunity for gospel to be shared. And also, like it says that
Yeah.
there's actually only a few workers. Like the harvest is plentiful, but the problem is not the harvest. The problem is the workers and the lack of it. And so I would argue that long-term going is so important because we need more workers.
Yeah.
Just to be very blunt, we need more workers. There are people groups that are unreached, the nations that are unreached, that don't know the name of Jesus. And if you only have a short-term goer going to these nations, you might have one, if by the grace of God. But really, you need someone to dedicate their lives to saying yes for a nation and a people group to know Jesus. And so that's why I say long-term really is the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said. They're going because you're showing that you love these people the way that Christ loves them.
Yeah.
Like that's what your motivation should be in going, right?
Yeah.
Like that's why y'all went. You know, that's how you're trying to pastor and shepherd people to go, is like we're showing the world the way that the love of Christ. I mean, honestly. So
Yeah.
man, y'all are awesome. I'm just so grateful you're a fielder and shepherding people to go. So if somebody wants to go on a short, mid, long term, how do you want to tell the people to sign up or let you know that they're interested in going?
Yeah, we have a whole webpage, a whole section on fielder.org for sending for missions.
Okay.
And it's so easy. There's a short-term option. There's a list of trips that you can just press one button, apply, and you get to sign up for a trip.
Yeah.
You can also do a midterm option. There's also long-term opportunities. And so it's literally just go to fielder.org.
Hey.
All you need to know is to just go there.
Cool. And I'll link that
Yeah.
in the show notes below.
Yes.
For
Fielder.org/go, and it'll take you right to it.
Exactly.
so easy.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, before we cut off, is there anything else that you want to encourage people with as they wrestle with this call to go? As they're praying about it, as they're hearing your stories, is there any other encouragement or even challenge that you want to leave the people with?
Revelation 7:9 says that there would be every tribe, nation, tongue, language, everyone who has ever lived on earth. There's going to be at least one representative from them, from these people gathered around the throne worshiping Jesus. Our challenge is, are we going to be one of the people that get to be a part of seeing that vision come to reality? God's going to make it happen. We are not going to make that happen, but we get to be a part of what God is doing. So do you want to see the nations come to faith? Do you want to be a part of God's great, grand plan? Because he wants you to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all you need to do is to be obedient, just to say yes.
It's good.
And all these barriers that we were talking about, like we have done so much work to break down every single one of them. We've got financial scholarships that are available. So, you know, even for fielder members, 25% off to go on a trip. For if you're a student, it's 50% off. And even then, we've got a fundraising page that makes it easy. And we're teaching you how to fundraise, all those kind of pieces there. As far as like the age or the time or any of those kind of barriers that you might come up with, we have thought long and hard about how to navigate each one of those. And we want to help you process it too. So there really isn't a reason to say no.
Yeah.
If you want to be a part, if you want to be a part of God's grand plan of seeing all the nations come to faith, because there is a reason, but it feels like at this point with where technology is and all these kind of things, that there should not be unreached people anymore, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But there are. And there are still people groups that have still not heard the name of Jesus because people have not gone to them yet.
Yeah.
That's good.
And because they need more workers on the field. Like Angela said, when in Scripture it says that we are to pray to the Lord of the harvest to send more workers into the field.
good.
And then that's what we're going to continue to do. And I know that God is going to raise people up out of our church.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that, about partnering
Man,
in that
I'm
way
pumped up.
and being obedient to
Yeah,
what
yeah.
God has put in front of us. Like it's insane to say yes to the things that God is asking us to do, but at the same time, we get to see Him move, and we get to understand His character that much more when we're willing to put ourselves in an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
good.
And to add to that, you actually said God is a sending God.
Yeah.
I love the fact that God Himself has example to us sending and going. God the Father has sent the Son. The
Yes.
Son went and obeyed, gave His life up. That was the sacrifice and the cost of Him showing us His love and making the gospel possible.
Yeah.
And then Jesus sends a Spirit to us to live and indwell us, to be able to go and share the gospel,
Yeah.
to do the very thing He already did. And that's the encouragement. God doesn't tell us or invite us to do something He didn't do. He's already exampled it for us. He's empowered us and equipped us to be able to do it. And we get to do it together. We're not alone. It's not just one person going. It's all of us going together to be able to exalt the name of Jesus. And that is a privilege that we have. And we miss out when we say no.
Yeah.
So that's the last thing I'll
And
say.
mic drop. And we're gonna end right there because that was gold. Yeah, that's all we have. So oh my goodness. You guys are just so great. I love you all so much. Everything that they shared, Bible verses, links, we'll link those in the show notes below for you to have easy access to sign up for a trip, because I know that God is going to call you guys listening maybe now or in the future to go and proclaim the name of Jesus here in the States or to the nations. And so I hope you will join Fielder on that journey. They want to join you. We want to join you in helping train and equip you to go. So I hope that you would step into that. But I also hope that you'll join us next week for another episode in this series on going. So until then, we'll see you later. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's show. Let us know if you have any questions or feedback from today's episode by going to fielder.org/podcast. Or if you're watching on YouTube, just leave a comment below. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to leave a rating and review. That helps this message reach more people in our community, because it's our hope this podcast will equip you and many others to live as a follower of Christ outside the walls of the church.